start our recording. So if we're missing anybody here this evening, we'll be sure to be able to catch them. I certainly want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. We've got a small but mighty group, and we hope that everybody is willing to be interactive. Nicole loves it when we've got good interaction for programs like this. I've met most of you in person, but if I've not met you yet, my name is Courtney Gray, and I'm the director of the Beef Quality Assurance Program here for Pennsylvania, which is probably where I've met the majority of you. Newly kind of taking a portion of the retail and food service role on as well for the beef checkoff here in PA. So that kind of led us to chatting with Nicole and wanting to bring that kind of retail and food service ideas, but to the BQA team. So we've got BQA producers that are, maybe interested in selling product to a consumer or just having a better connection with people around them. And Nicole is a registered dietitian, and she's also a blogger, and she is a Masters of Beef Advocacy graduate, which is awesome. So we thought that she would be a super speaker to bring to the BQA crew for this evening. So without much further ado, I will turn it over to Nicole and let her kind of take it away.
Amazing. Courtney, thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you so much for bringing me to a group that I'm so passionate about interacting with. And in these times when I'm unable to get out on tour with people like Jen and people like Caitlin, it's really a gift to me to at least interact with you virtually. So if we could pull up our slide deck. Amazing. So welcome, Pennsylvania beef producers. Specifically, you are the cream of the crop, right? You are BQA program participants. You're in that elite 85%. I want to talk to you tonight about bridging the gap from ranch to retail. Next slide, please. So Courtney has told you a little bit about me. I am indeed a registered dietitian and certified personal trainer. In most of my professional life, I do things like in-home meal prep and write workout plans. But as Courtney mentioned, I do blog. And somewhere along the lines, I wrote an article for my blog about shopping without being shamed at the grocery store. And I've loved beef my whole life. I have no ranching background, but just a huge fan, big part of my diet. And I had mentioned something about grain finished beef being just as great a choice and some of those benefits in comparison to the ever popular grass finished beef. And long story short, I got invited on a tour and some of the operations in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York. And I had a chance to meet some ranchers, and as a science-based practitioner, I said, oh my gosh, these are my people. And it's just been kind of a little bit of a love story ever since. So I went on this tour. I said, Jean, she heads up the programming in New York, tell me about this MBA program. I went home and did it the next week, got into top of the class 2 years later on my second try. More recently, I've completed the Animal Ag Ally programming to learn a bit more, and I had the pleasure of speaking at the Stakeholders Summit this past May, sponsored by Northeast Beef. And I'm also, even though I'm an urban dweller, I'm the proud mom of one of our new junior beef ambassadors. So my little 6-year-old Nala is out there in her day-to-day doing her best to also tell the story of beef, which sometimes doesn't come out the right way. Sometimes like, oh my God, what do you mean you don't eat burgers? But we're but we're working on some of the delivery, right? So I live in pretty close to one of the cities that you probably serve, because Pennsylvania is really close to those 4 major markets: New York, DC, Boston, and Philly. So I feel that myself always be an urban dweller and not any kind of unicorn of a dietitian, I just came to really love your story because it's something I love to eat. The more I learned, the more I wanted to talk about. And I think Jen can speak to this to some extent. Like, a lot of other dietitians look to me for information about beef. So if I can talk about it with as much love and passion as I do, if we could go to the next slide, Courtney, please. My purpose here is, I think you guys do something so amazing, basically for our entire country. And I want you to walk away tonight feeling that same love and passion for telling your story. Because I'm on the outside looking in, and I look at you all, you are the original stewards of the environment. And that's not just because it makes business sense to you. From what I've seen with my own two eyes, you really care about leaving the planet in better shape than the way you found it. You're the providers of where protein meets pleasure. I wish I could take credit for that expression, but I picked it up at top of the class in Colorado. But really, I feel I'm in safe company here, and you're not going to go rat me out. Does anyone go and celebrate with a chicken cutlet, or you know what I'm saying? Or even like a pork Milanese? Like, no, when we go out and celebrate, like, we're having steak, we're having burgers. I'm on a quest for the best burger. You are the faces and the families behind arguably the most quintessential American foods. And beef isn't just something that makes people happy. Obviously, it makes people happy, but it is a pillar of strength. And there's a lot of research behind beef that shows it can fit in a diet that helps people live longer, healthier, and happier lives. So if I were you, man, I would be patting myself on the back, and I would be pretty darn proud to be a part of that story. I think you all are amazing. If we could go to the next slide, please. So based on your pre-webinar data, that little survey we sent to you, I know that you're super pressed for time. I mean, I didn't need a survey to tell me that. I know you all are really, really busy, but I want to talk about some strategies based on the platforms you say that you're most active on. We're really going to take a little bit of a deeper dive tonight into Instagram. And I want to help you align some of the aspects that you take so seriously in BQA that thankfully really align with the consumer values in 2020. So we're going to identify at least 3 different strategies to increase your engagement on social media. And once again, utilizing strategies that can be implemented without a huge time investment. And we're also going to define some best practices for just keeping your pages safe places, places where you want to engage, and places where we can keep the dialogue productive. Because I know if I have been the target of animal activist trolls, I'm sure that you have at some point as well. We can go to the next slide, please. So 2020, what a roller coaster, right? So, excuse me. So obviously shopping habits have changed for many different reasons, and there have been a lot of different barriers at the grocer, online, things in the supply chain. We've seen a lot of changes, but every year I like to look at 2 big pieces of data and 2 big really like food marketing institutions. One is IFIC and the other is FMI. And there is different data available throughout the year, but for the purposes of this evening, I looked at the IFIC Food and Health Survey for 2020, and I think you're going to be really pleased to see some of the things that consumers are increasingly finding valuable to them, especially when they shop in 2020. So the first one we'll talk about, and this is my favorite when we're talking beef, is environmental sustainability. So this has remained stable. we hope everyone cares about the environment, right? Like, I think I hope that's safe to say that whether you're on the producing end, the consumer end, or somewhere in between, that you're doing your best to leave the planet a little bit better. So while this has been a concern for quite some time, we're seeing an uptick in how this impacts purchasing decisions. Now, I think you all are perfectly poised to tell the story of beef and its role in environmental sustainability in a few different ways. So, of course, in BQA, there is that whole environmental stewardship piece, right? We know that that's already there. This is just part of your life. But a bigger picture, when you're showcasing some of that, you can actually show, especially to these larger markets, these urban markets such as Philadelphia, New York, Boston, and DC, you specifically in Pennsylvania, arguably that is local to these big city consumers. So you are really preserving the environmental value of their backyard, and that's huge. So yes, there is that. But if we want to, we could tell our own stories, right? But if we want to take a deeper dive into some places like beefresearch.org, or maybe seek out some expert opinions such as Dr. Frank Mitloner or Dr. Sarah Place, we know that there's a lot of data that shows not only do ranchers care for the environment, there is a lot of data that proves raising cattle can actually improve the environment, have that super positive impact. So the more comfortable we get telling that story, the better off the consumer, because this is such a huge point of interest. And we're going to talk, excuse me, a bit about health halos later. And I won't let this whole conversation go by without talking about plant-based alternatives. But the fact is that you all are producing more beef, utilizing fewer resources, and somehow doing it on less land. So there's a big story to tell there, where plant-based alternatives, they might seem better for the environment and be marketed and such, but we don't have that data there. So you all are winning again. Okay, let's move on to our next value. Once again, 2020, crazy year in the supermarket. And according to the IFIC Food and Health Survey, we know that the pandemic has significantly changed our concerns and our beliefs about food safety, at least for now. So it remains to be seen if this is really going to be a huge value shift. But despite everything that's happened this year with the supply chain, of course, we all went through the fear of, do I need to wear gloves? Do I need to be wiping down all my groceries? Is it even safe to go into a supermarket? Once again, BQA has all of those HACCP checkpoints. That is huge. That is a huge food safety win for you all. And you are able not only to tell that story, you are not only able to literally showcase those points because you have control over many of them, but another point of added trust is you don't have to do BQA. You voluntarily did this BQA programming. So I think the more we open this conversation about all of the extra care on top of an already very challenging line of work, you, even fewer than the 1% of Americans who are feeding the rest of us, you are really that very elite, tiny percentage that are going the extra mile to make sure that the food you are raising is safe and wholesome. And I think also when we're talking about food safety, I didn't want to go too deep into specific antibiotics and things like that, but your concern for animal welfare and all of the measures you take there, that does tie into the safety about tied to the conversation about food safety. It's all relevant, and you have all of that data, and you're going that extra mile. So we're really speaking to those consumer values too. All right, let's move on to our next one. This is my favorite. So who's heard of the DGAs? Can we put that in the chat box, your familiarity with dietary guidelines? Oh, can we go back? There we go. So in the chat box, let me know, like, have you heard of the DGAs? Is it something you're at all familiar with? Is it a conversation that's happening between you and consumers at all prior to 2020? You could just put like a, yes, no. I see a way to go from Munala, from Caitlin. Thank you so much. Yes, okay, so I've got some yeses coming up there. And if you're not familiar with oh, a fellow Rodriguez on here. Hello. If you're not familiar with the DGAs, I'm sure you've seen My Plate. So My Plate is pretty much the visual representation of the dietary guidelines for America. And really, these are in place. These are dietary recommendations that are really meant to help Americans live longer, healthier, happier lives. And the most visual representation being My Plate, which again, I'm sure you have seen. And what we're seeing here, okay, not really coming up in conversation. Alrighty. So what we're seeing here is that we have an increased familiarity with these DGAs, and it's actually a dramatic increase over the past decade since 2010. So as a dietitian, and again, this term plant-based gets thrown around quite frequently. When I think plant-based and when I define plant-based, either when I'm being quoted or just talking with clients or talking on social media, plant-based to me is My Plate, and these are these DGAs. So this is taking your plate. Half of it is quite simply non-starchy fruits and vegetables of your choosing, a quarter of your plate for something like a whole grain or a potato, and then guess what I'm putting in that last quarter at least 3 days a week? Beef. Yes, indeed. So if we are looking at these dietary guidelines and we're kind of rethinking what it means to be plant-based, you can see that you've earned that spot on the plate that's very much in line with the government guidelines. So when we're thinking about beef, I'm thinking wholesome, I'm thinking nutritious, and I'm thinking as an anchor of my plate. So this is another really great value that is right in line with BQA and with Americans. We could go next here. Okay, so as a dietitian, you will never hear me say that processed foods are bad. I love my Oreos as much as anybody and a whole bunch of other processed foods. And a trend that's not mentioned here is in 2020, we definitely saw the consumer gravitating back to the center of the aisle, right? So think middle of the pandemic, you wanted something comforting, and a lot of us were going to the baked goods aisle. We might have revisited even like cake mixes. And then we wanted things that were just easy, maybe pre-made mac and cheese with some mix-ins. There was also the issue of food prep fatigue. So shortcuts and processed foods definitely came into the fold as being very popular. And really every food to some extent is processed. Unfortunately, I can't just take cattle and take a fork and knife to it and call it a meal. It's got to be processed. It's got to be processed a little bit. However, what we're seeing is that half of Americans said that whether food is processed will impact their purchasing decision, and that this has gained traction over the past 10 years. So everything I just said about processed foods aside, how can we leverage beef here, right? So when we think about it, Beef is really very minimally processed. Of course, ground beef might be a little bit of an exception, but still, we're just talking really a lot of mechanical processing, butchering, fabrication, things of that nature. So once again, while we don't have to point fingers and we don't necessarily have to speak badly of alternatives, there is a really big difference between purchasing beef and purchasing something that's labeled plant-based that has 20 or 30 ingredients. So the more we can tell the story of beef, again, that family tie-in, this is a wholesome food. This is something you feed to your own family. And this is something that you have raised with such great care because of this BQA programming, that is going to line right up with what the consumer values now. And I think that's super exciting. All right, next slide, please, Courtney. Thank you. Okay, so we have a poll here. I'm super excited about it. This image is from Epicurious, and honestly, I've lost track of all these products, but I want to ask you first, what percentage of Americans do you think identify as vegetarian? So we'll give you about 30 seconds we'll see an answer pop up there. All right, let's see. Guys, so you couldn't decide, was it 5% or was it 33%? The good news, guess what? Thank you so much for that. That's really exciting. So it is only 5%, a mere 5% of consumers in America identify as vegetarian. So that's not even talking about our vegans. Our vegans are an even tinier percentage. So let's back up to some of these products in terms of what we were just discussing. I'm looking at all these labels and it makes my head spin. I've lost track of how many brands there are. In my humble opinion, I don't think this even belongs in the meat case. That really bothers me personally. But the truth is, you've heard a lot about all of these things this past year, right? And some data shows that these items have seen an increase in purchases of 264% over 2019. So this category is growing, and I know we hear that number and it sounds super scary. And then that's compounded by the fact that CEOs of some of these companies are coming out and speaking very poorly about animal agriculture. And these gentlemen certainly have an agenda, and their agenda is that they're going to just put you all out of business, and we're all going to eat fake meat the rest of our lives and save the planet and blah, blah, blah. So I know that that messaging is very loud, but you have to remember, one, it's coming from a very loud and tiny percentage. And second, I would really invite you to look at trend lines instead of the headlines. And what I mean by that is, yes, people are trying these things. They do have a health halo around them. There is a perception that they are better for the planet. But when we take a deeper dive into some of this data from places like IFIC and FMI, we actually see that people who are making these purchases, guess what? They're still purchasing beef and pork and chicken. So it remains to be seen if these items really are here to stay, or if they're just a flash in a pan and something for people to try. I'm sure you remember other trends in the past few years. Things like coconut oil and coconut water, stuff that just never seemed to go away, but eventually they died down. Whether or not they do, I really strongly encourage you to think about plant-based in the context we discussed in terms of the DGAs. And also remember that little tiny percentage, and Courtney, we could move to the next slide. We're not talking to our extremes. We're not trying to connect with vegans. We know that they are just who they are and they don't want to change. We don't really need to have these conversations with our fellow ranchers. We know that they're eating beef, right? So if we look at that middle, that 68% in the middle, that's the consumer that we are trying to target. That's where we want to amplify these super positive messages about beef. This is our opportunity to take someone who's already buying beef and make them feel so good about it, they're buying it one more time a week. This is our opportunity to take that chicken or pork eater and make them say, you know what? I feel a little bit better about actually buying beef tonight. Or maybe someone who doesn't even try it yet, but they're open to animal proteins. Those are the people that we want to target. Amplify this message and keep spreading the good word about all the good that you do for the planet and for the people. And we can go to our next slide. I found this image. I believe her name is Mia Masuko, and it really resonated with me. It doesn't have to be a food fight. It doesn't have to be either or. So it would be remiss of me to not speak of the other extreme besides vegans. I know that it's tempting to sort of commiserate and identify with the extreme carnivore diet or keto diet because it is very meat friendly and it's all meat all the time. And I know that's wonderful for producers, but I would really love to see us all, quote, united on the plate, or maybe I should say hashtag united on the plate. So that is a big initiative from NCBA this year. And I had the pleasure, I'm also a fruit and vegetable ambassador in action on behalf of the Produce for Better Health Foundation. And I had the pleasure of doing basically a PSA on this. It's not either or. And the best part, I would say, as a dietitian about having beef on the plate is that it makes you want to eat all the other stuff. No one wants just a plate of vegetables, or maybe some people do, but you're going to have a lot better adherence to your diet when you have some beef on that plate. So let's think positive, let's think inclusive, and let's just know that we could all kind of work together in that plant-based context. And we can go to the next slide. Thank you, Courtney. All right, so this is a photo I took of a gentleman on an operation out in Colorado, and that's, I think, Nate Wolf, another top of the class graduate in the background there. I love photos like this. Unfortunately, I don't get to take them all the time, but I'm sure you have something like this. So what kind of messages, based on what we've learned tonight, what's going to resonate with these consumers we're trying to move? So one, speaking to that environmental connection, a peek into your geographical landscape, that is going to win 9 times out of 10. Those photos and those videos that show the beauty of your operation, and so many of them are just so beautiful, and these beautiful animals and how you care for them, and moreover, how they help improve the environment, those are all going to be a win in reaching the consumer. I can't emphasize this enough. If you're comfortable, glimpses into your family life. I know that beef is a sustainable family affair, and I recognize that many of your operations have been passed down from generation to generation to generation, and perhaps you're looking to pass it on in the near future. So this works in 2 ways. Of course, cute kids always work, right? But there is this connection of, well, if it's good enough for their family, it's good enough for my family too. And when we see the care that through BQA you put into this, with your family as well, that's going to be a huge value connector. Because when we look at all of the values we saw in these consumer trends tonight, this is really about people shopping for their families and wanting to do the right thing by their families, just like you do yours. How do you prepare beef? I love seeing what producers and ranchers are actually serving to their families, especially the meals that you're serving during the day, during your busiest times of the season. And these could be your own recipes, these could be your own photos, but we'll talk later. There are so many other resources that you can rely on and still really make an impact. We'll see some examples later utilizing quotes, whether it is connected to your faith, whether it is connected to something about the environment or animal care. Utilizing quotes is a great way to help plan your posts and really give people, the consumer, a flavor of what you're about. And I just wanted to highlight another option here. We are talking a little bit more about Instagram tonight because it does play nicely with other platforms. And one example of that is you can take content from Twitter, whether it's your own or someone else's, maybe one of those experts we spoke of earlier, and you could easily screenshot that and share it to Instagram to further amplify those positive beef messages. So we've got a lot of options here. And we go next. Okay, so we're gonna get a little bit into the nitty-gritty here, and we'll keep this obviously most relevant to you all, but I really want to talk about some key strategies in outreach, because it's one thing to have beautiful pictures, great videos and these quotes, but if no one's looking at them, or it's just, you know, the other extreme of other fellow ranchers, like that's great. But if we're trying to reach that consumer, whether it's direct to consumer or just wanting to more positively impact our entire field, we need to prioritize engagement. And we'll get to the details of that in a moment. So I want to talk about how you can prioritize engagement. Also, staying top of mind with your new audience, and how can we use something like Instagram stories to do that? And then taking it a step further, how can we leverage those stories with gamification? And I'll be honest, this is a word I just picked up in the past month from another dietitian who does improv. And gamification is really just, how are we truly pulling people in? How are we engaging? How are we making them engage with each other? And then coming back continually for more content. So a lot of exciting little strategies here. And we can go to our next slide. Okay, so you could give me a thumbs up who pre-pandemic would get to go and socialize at church or school or at a bar. Who used to get to like go out and have conversation? Anybody? Someone give me a thumbs up. Do we remember what that was like, going out and talking to people, not through a not
like
through a
years ago.
Right, feels like so long ago. I think actually my last in-person trip was a trip with PA Beef, and we were in DC talking about some of these things. And anyhow,
that's gonna be almost a year ago now.
And
already.
that was about a year ago. Fantastic. So so I want you to think back to those pre-pandemic times for a moment. And, you know, Jen, I'll call you out. Imagine I go up to Jen Orr and I make a statement, and then I just walk away and I don't wait for her to react. I don't engage in conversation. Or imagine you going into a bar and just saying something, and then someone opens their mouth to respond to you. Instead, you're just, okay, bye. And you literally like leave to go to the bathroom or do one of those goodbyes. So your number one strategy for actually reaching people and engaging with them is you have to stay for the conversation. Now, I know, again, I knew this before your surveys, but your survey indicates that time is a barrier. And I understand how insanely busy you all are, and you don't have all the time in the world. Yeah, that would be super awkward, Jen. I agree. You don't you don't have all the time in the world to babysit your social media. However, I'm going to say, one, quality over quantity. So if you can find 3 20-minute pockets during your week, I would say post during those 3 20-minute pockets. You can have something queued up, and knowing what you're going to post and maybe having a note section of captions and things like that, those are going to be time savers of actually posting. But if you can set aside 20 minutes after that post time, that's going to drive up engagement. So people are going to come to you. People might have comments. When you're there to reply back, likes plus comments equals engagement. So the more you're there to boost it up, the better. And then boosting it up is going to boost its visibility a bit as well and get it into the algorithm a little bit quicker. And that's really about treating posts with the same care as a real life conversation. So of course you're going to have positive commentary on your posts, whatever they may be, based on some of the things we just discussed, because these are all positive things we're showcasing, right? But we know that there are always people coming to us in the animal ag community with maybe not such a positive agenda. So there is always a line of how much you want to engage there, but just keep in mind, it's not just that activist waiting for your reaction. Eventually, everyone around you is also watching your reaction. So while it might feel like it's just you and this one person between keyboards, the other, imagine once again that we're in a room with a bunch of people, and your other followers, they will take note of how you handle some of those more difficult conversations. So personally, I'll be honest, I have been in some of these pitfalls and I haven't always handled it well. It's taken me some time, but when you come from a perspective of genuine belief in what you do, and you have the confidence to say, well, I'm sorry you heard that, but may I share A, B, C, and D? Even just putting that out there, first of all, an activist doesn't want to listen anyway, and they're out the door already. But if there's a chance that someone will listen, you've not only surprised them with how respectfully you've treated them, but your whole audience just saw that whole situation go down and you come out shining. So those are some of the ways not only to boost engagement, but keep things super positive, because this is your space and it should really be kind of sacred. All right, we can go to the next one. Okay, so if you can tell me in the chat box who, or even just give me a thumbs up, does anyone currently use Instagram stories? I don't think I'm seeing any thumbs. You see any thumbs, Courtney?
I don't see any thumbs.
All right. Okay. Well, you know what? This is a fantastic opportunity then. Have you ever imagined that you want to produce your very own day in the life TV special? Guys, stop a minute. I know I sound like an info. Okay, so Robert uses it. Caitlin uses it. Okay, so we're lukewarm. We're getting there. We're getting there. I know I sound like an infomercial, like you've got Instagram stories, but really that's what Instagram stories is all about. So let's back it up. Say, just for argument's sake, you've decided you're going to carve out the time to have 3 static posts per week because you know you can really devote that 20 minutes to each and every one of those posts. That's fantastic. You can still at any time give a quick little glimpse into your life and your operation utilizing Instagram stories. And doing so is going to keep you top of mind with your audience, because they will see at the top that you have a story, whereas your post might not be showing up right away, especially if you're not posting super frequently. So of course, this is going to offer a little glimpse, and you can be featuring some of the things we talked about back in the slide with the gentleman in Colorado. So this could be, this is what I'm cooking with beef today. Here's a glimpse into my kitchen. You can utilize certain little icons and tags. I love to see what temperature you all are working in all the time, because I know, like, I can't complain. I'm inside a lot of the day. So it really like brings home the message that you're there in all of the elements. If you're comfortable, you can tag like a general location, like, hey, I'm here in Pennsylvania, and that can boost your visibility as well. So get comfortable with Instagram stories to keep you and your operation top of mind, and of course using it very positively. But then we can take it a step further. We can go to strategy number 3 here. Okay, so Instagram stories, of course, is like your own, it's like your own little day in the life TV show anytime you want to, which is awesome. And I will say, I feel that that's where a lot of the fun is. And we'll go to some examples of folks in animal ag who I think do a really good job in general with this whole thing. But this is where I see more personality. This is where you can show the funny moments of like, hey, I'm a mom just like you, and this is the silly stuff that's going on in my house or on the ranch right now. But then you can take this a step further, and you can use Instagram stories as essentially your very own marketing research tool into your audience. So let's go through each one of these, and we could talk about how you could use this and how it would be relevant to beef and BQA in particular. So you have a few different features. These are 3 real good ones. So one is polls. I will tell you, yesterday I had a kind of tongue-in-cheek post about plant breeding, and I wanted to tease up the post a little bit. And since my post was about how bananas, watermelons, and eggplant have been bred over time to increase the edible flesh, I utilized the polls to ask my audience, okay, bananas, would you rather have a pudding or a cream pie? Eggplant, is it caponata or Parmesan? Watermelon, you want that soaked in vodka or in a fruit salad? And I was just using it as a fun kind of teaser to my post. But for you all, you can really, you could really get to know your audience. Would you rather have a flat iron or a flank? Do you prefer ground beef in a 5-pound pack or single 1-pound packs? Do you I don't know how relevant this would be to you, but in particular about beef, do you prefer grass finished over grain finished? And someone did this recently. She's one of our examples later. And all of those little tap and goes are really, really fun for your audience, because people want to tell you about themselves. People want to talk about themselves all day long. So polls are one way that you can really increase the engagement with Instagram stories. Second, questions. I've never been brave enough to just put that sticker up and say, ask me anything. I find that like a little too personal and daunting, but I have a lot of male dietitian friends who do it at least once a week. And inviting your audience to just ask you a question, and might sound really vulnerable, but you can really see what people want to know about your operation, about your offerings, and things of that nature. You could also utilize questions the opposite way. So for example, I utilized that question sticker recently. I had put up my 2020 book list. I wanted to know, what are other people reading? And then I ended up with this list of like 20 different books that I shared back to my audience. So you can do something, say, for example, you can ask the question, what's something you want to know about beef? Or you could ask the question, what kind of recipes are you most interested in? Anything that you find relevant, consider that question sticker. I see a question from Caitlin in a moment. When you see, you can use that question sticker really however you see fit, either way. And I want to get to quizzes, and then I'd love to get into the chat box on this one too. Quizzes can be just really fun little engagement pieces. So you can ask, the quizzes give, I think, 4 different options, and one is a right answer. Could say, which one of these products is actually not derived from beef? And we know that there are all sorts of things, right? Like crayons and leather and everything else. Which one of these things is not used as part of the feed for a grain finished animal? Like there are all sorts of different things you could talk about: food waste, feed, nutrition, and really have a lot of fun that way as well. And is it okay? Can I go to, I want to go to a question that's really relevant to this slide. Caitlin wants to know, do you see that you just have to start with using these options on IG stories, and then over time your followers will increase their engagement with them? Absolutely. So I would say just start. I would say start using them, and without getting super specific, you can see over time what days your audience is most active. So I probably wouldn't try that on a Saturday night in the summer when everyone is, I mean, hopefully by then, right, out doing stuff. But I would say now in the evenings, if you have time, this is a really good time to play around with some of this stuff, because people, your consumer is like, oh, it's dark out, I'm just gonna stay home and scroll through Instagram and maybe look for some beef recipes. And also because people are thinking about more like tasty things like beef. We're not in that like super restrictive diet mode right now. So I think this is a great time to start playing around and see what the engagement is. And then on something like questions, if you share those answers back, that's even more engagement with your audience. They see that you took the time to read their question, answer it, and then share the information anonymously with the rest of your audience. That's a fantastic question. Okay, and I think we could go next. Okay, so I wanted to just go into a couple of other sort of top line Instagram strategies that you might find work for you in your operation, but they're not necessary. Really, I'm offering these because I know you're pressed for time and I know you want to get these positive messages out, or maybe your own business out in a really time effective manner. So something to consider is, what does a pattern look like on Instagram? So if I were to look at your account and look at the first 9 squares, is there some sort of rhyme or reason, or is it sort of mixed up? And really, either way is okay. There's no right or wrong, and the algorithm changes a lot. But if you consider a pattern, this could potentially save you time, and it could potentially help you get better engagement with your audience. So some key points here are that your audience comes to know what to expect of you. You sort of set the tone and you set a flavor, and these can even become thematic. Like perhaps you know that your quote square is going to be something really relevant to animal nutrition, or I know on Tuesdays it just so turns out you post about the environment consistently. So having some kind of visual setup can help, but I think more importantly, beyond that, beyond the visual continuity, again, you're pressed for time. You don't want to be overthinking this. If you know maybe 5 posts in advance, and you just have like pictures, quotes, whatever, and you have the captions and you have them queued up as drafts in your Instagram, that's going to save you time as well, right? So we still need that 20-minute window to engage, but when we have stuff that we know we already want to share with our audience, it's going to be less of a hassle, and this is going to feel more fun and like less of a drain, because there's nothing worse than I know I should be posting, I know I want to interact, but I don't have anything planned. So for planning purpose, if you have a vision, if you have a real vision, that can really help. That could really help in that department as well. I just want to also say a quick word on using actual planning apps. So there are apps such as, I think Planned is actually the big one. Yes, that can save you time, but we're in a really, this is not news to anyone, we're in a really uncertain time in general. And I think if anything that we learned in 2020 is we don't know what's coming tomorrow, and we don't know what major US or world event could come down the pike. So just for the sake of always being sensitive, I think it's better to just have some things kind of geared up in the works, but not automatically set to post, because you never know when it's going to be a tragedy. And then like there's this big national tragedy, and I don't know, I'm posting a beef brownie recipe. It looks kind of insensitive, right? So plan, but don't feel like you have to over plan. But knock on wood, hopefully, hopefully the rest of 2020 is uneventful and you could post those beef brownie recipes. Next slide, please. So we've talked about what to post. We've talked about making the time to post. How are we making sure we find that 68% we looked at on that bell curve, right? So once again, we're obviously going to use hashtags that will appeal to our fellow farmers and ranchers, because we're all going to use hashtag beef it's what's for dinner. We can definitely use hashtag beef farmers and ranchers. That's another one. But think about these people, think about this consumer. You are in that 1% of feeding them. They don't know how to find you on the farm, but you can find them at the table. You can find them based on a lot of their food and health and environmental interests, and really meet consumers where they are. So think about using a mix of hashtags. And in every post, I would really invite you to utilize that max that's allowed. And I think right now it's a max of 30 hashtags. Think of using hashtags that each carry anywhere between 6,000 and 600,000 posts attached to them. Because if we're using hashtags that have fewer than 6,000 posts attached to them, you just might not show up. But if we're using those huge hashtags, you tend to get lost in the shuffle. So there is kind of a sweet spot, and we want to use a mix of all of those. And as far as actual tags, what are consumers thinking of? Hashtag food trends, hashtag healthy meal prep, hashtag sustainable living. So start thinking of things that are not only specific to beef and BQA, but are specific to what people might be looking for when they're actually shopping. Even hashtag supermarket trends. There are so many that can help reach that movable middle and actually find consumers that we want to target with those positive messages. Okay, I think we can go next here. All right, and finally, aren't they they're just the cutest. They kill me, these two. So just some inspiration. And Courtney, I know on my end, I was able to click on these. Are you able to click on these hyperlinks?
I think so.
Cool. So we're just gonna go quickly one by one to some of these examples. Again, these are not all In the beef space, I do have Dairy Carrie here just because she's an incredible advocate in general, and she does a really great job with her page. And even if we can take a look, great, but if not, these should show up.
There, is that showing up?
There she is. Yeah.
Awesome.
So Dairy Carrie, I will point out that she does an incredible job in her Instagram stories. She's super funny. I see like a whole bunch of her life as a mom with her two boys and them being kind of nuts, but she holds it all together regardless. Yeah, they're so cute. And she obviously has these beautiful photos that she's taken. She shows herself. She shows recipes that obviously feature dairy. In her stories, she features her menu of the week pretty much every week. But she's also not afraid to show the animals. And I think it's really, really impactful in terms of a glimpse of what it's really like at her operation. So she's a great example. And you can see while there's a mix, she's not really following a super organized grid, and it works. It works really beautifully. Oh, that little face on her, boy. Okay, Naomi Loomis. I'm probably a little bit biased because I spent time with her at top of the class. We graduated together. I just want to point out that yes, she utilizes a mix of quotes and she really speaks to her faith quite a bit, and it's very impactful. But I also want to point out that she has obviously, for some of these photos, she's utilized a professional photographer. Now, I'm not saying like go pay for a photo shoot if you don't want to. I haven't done one since my engagement pictures, but I will say that you could look at any one of these professional photos and you could tell that she could be posting anything about ranch life and it's gonna match that photo. It's going to make an impact. So if you feel like making that investment, know that it's not something you use once. You recycle that photo shoot again and again and again. And her own photos are fantastic too. And I think you get a real glimpse of what her life is like in Nebraska. Girls Eat Beef too. So Girls Eat Beef recently did a really, really great series in her Instagram story, asking a lot of those questions about beef preferences. And I will say, like, actual content wise, she kind of hinges on the edge of antagonizing the activists sometimes, but I will also say that she combines a really amazing mix of life on the ranch, humor. She leverages humor really well with things like memes. And then she also puts in quotes. So it's not meticulously organized, but if you go through her feed, there is definitely a flavor to it, and she's made it super duper appealing. And she's out in California. The Twizzleman Ranch. Now, I highlighted them. I'm sure you've all seen Kaya Twizzleman, like in People Magazine and everywhere else, which has been pretty amazing. And this is her family's ranch. But I highlighted them because they do highlight their actual products. So this is a really great example of showcasing your actual products, also your non-food products. You could see in that lower left-hand corner, beautiful photos of the actual ranch. And then they're showing actual food from time to time that they're actually preparing. So this is another, once again, maybe not a huge rhyme or reason, but they are consistently posting really similar things to showcase their business. So I think that's another great example. And finally, these two, I think they need a show or something. Cooking with the Cowboy, that's where that photo is from. She also has a fantastic blog, really great recipes, but I think it's really clear that she blends she blends showcasing her family, beautiful recipes, and life on the ranch. Some of these are obviously professional photographs, but a lot of them are her own. So there's a realness to them, and the food, it's all really simply prepared stuff, but it looks delicious. It looks approachable and really inviting as well. And foolishly, I did not put myself up here. I'm not a rancher, but I would, my handle is on this last slide. I would love to connect with you on Instagram or wherever else you see fit. And here, I'm sorry, here is a reminder, we're talking all this content. If you don't have your own recipe content, if you don't want to take pictures of your own food, Courtney, I know you have a very specific link that's in my notes. You all have access to the producer end of Beef It's What's for Dinner. And there is so much content that you can upcycle and recycle from the folks over at Beef. And the pictures of their recipes, I use them myself sometimes. They are gorgeous as well. So don't always feel like you have to reinvent the wheel. There is also content, I would say, here and at beefresearch.org that's right at your fingertips too.
Yep, and I'll be happy to pop that in the chat box here when we get ready to wrap up.
Yeah, and please connect with me. I know Jen really well on this call. She knows probably better than anyone how much I just love you all and how grateful I am for what you do, because it means I get to eat delicious things and I get to talk about what I love. So thank you. And I think at this point, Courtney, if there's time for questions, I would love to just chat with you all. And
yeah, absolutely. If anybody wants to either hop in the chat box and ask a question, or please feel free to take yourself off mute. We're very informal around here, so we would welcome you to interact with Nicole. And I'm going to just pop up that link for everyone in the chat quick.
And if you already have a handle on Instagram, if you want to share that in your if you want to share that in the chat, that would be amazing as well. I know we're like right on time because we started a few minutes late, but if anyone has questions, I'll stay in chat forever. Let's see.
Hey ladies, I do have a quick question.
Oh, hi.
Nicole, how long did it take you? Because you have an amazing engagement on all of your posts, the people who are commenting and liking. Like, how long did it take you to get there where people were really engaging with a lot of your posts on the daily?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think like real engagement probably for me, and this is probably on the longer end, I think it took like a good year of being really consistent and just of people coming to like know what to expect of me. And it's something that honestly, it's something that does change along with the algorithm sometimes and with different things that you do. But Jen, yeah, I think Jen, you have access. I think you like have access to what my engagement is. So you see like the peaks and valleys, but I would say maybe like the better part of a year being consistent. That's a great question. Caitlin wants to know, does using those hashtags that I recommend help gain new followers? So yes, it can help gain new followers. And if you want to take a little bit of a deeper dive, Caitlin, something else you can do within your chosen hashtags is to go in, click on that hashtag, and then go like a bunch of posts that use that same hashtag. And that will that has the potential to further drive engagement to your posts, because people will see your like and then say, oh, like who's this Caitlin, and probably go back to your post as well. And again, honestly, that's taking a little bit more time, but that's another strategy that can help build that engagement too.
Nicole, have you had luck interacting with others on Instagram, like either via sharing their stories or kind of tagging them in your stories, kind of that talking back and forth? I've seen some folks do that as well.
Yeah, so I get tagged. I get tagged probably like once a day. Um, and that can be another nice strategy as long as you're not abusing it. So I'll be honest, like I feel like sometimes someone's tagging me and it's really relevant, and it's like the ISSN tagged me today on a post about beef improving eyesight, and I was like, yeah, this is awesome, great post. And then sometimes people will just tag me because they want me to come like their post, and I'm like, dude, like I know this has nothing to do. So I think if you're tagging respectfully and responsibly, then I think it's great. But I'm personally like really careful with it. I want to make sure it's something relevant and not just looking like a, hey guys, come look at my post today. So
Sure. No, that helps. Thanks.
that's a good question.
Yeah.
And Robert, do I have it? Is it Bobbert Rodriguez? I want to start. I know that I follow, okay, great. Awesome. So I get to find you all too. And Courtney, do you think we could have this on a list?
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing. Amazing. Any other questions? And like seriously consider me a resource. I don't have like a huge following, but I do talk about beef when I can. So if you ever want to bounce ideas off of me or whatever you all need, like definitely shoot me a DM, or you guys are free to email me. Jen knows where to find me. So always glad to chat as well. That's a great question. So Robert wants to know, should I make a certain account for the beef or can I use my own? So if you are direct to consumer and that's not really showcased under your current handle, then yeah, you probably want to create one for your business. But if you just want to like utilize your platform to better amplify positive messages about beef, I say like go right ahead with the account you have and grow it from there. Absolutely.
Great question.
Amazing. I love talking about this stuff. Get those beefy messages out there, everyone.
Well, I know we had a small group tonight, but we're just really excited that everybody was interactive here. And we certainly want to thank Nicole for her time and just her dedication to the beef industry. She really does love it as much as she says she does. She came to us and wanted to come talk to you. That is not a joke. And we love it so much.
Thank you.
So thankful for that relationship that you and Jen have built over the years, and thankful for you sharing your words of wisdom with our folks here in PA.
It's my pleasure. And yeah, and Robert, I'm gonna check you all out. I think Courtney's gonna get a list together. We go follow each other. It's truly my pleasure, and I know how busy you all are, so thank you. Thank you for taking some time to spend your evening with me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. See ya.